Here is another thought experiment, if you would like to think of it as a thought experiment. Now, the notion of sort of preaching to the choir kind of thing. So, in the 21st century, being true to a personal, non-theistic metaphysic, such as radical commitment to ethical reason or an inner noetic clarity, often pits an individual's private intentions against public social projections. Often, did not say always, did not say must, did not say ever does. And this experience is marked by a specific type of friction where your inner spirituality or meaning is judged solely by your outer spirituality, purpose/action, as interpreted by others. 1. The experience of internal consonance. When you act against the grain based on a non-theistic conviction, you are seeking internal consistency, aligning your actions with deeply held metaphysical or moral values. Now, that doesn't mean that we then get a philosophical razor and separate what could be metaphysical or moral. Yet, I'm sure someone's already done that. Self-authentication. You rely on intuition and inner moral clarity rather than external social pressure. The intent-action gap. While you may perceive your intention as a direct reenactment of a higher principle, others only see the literal body movements or physical results, often failing to read the underlying goal. 2. The preaching to the choir projection. The preaching to the choir dynamic occurs when others lecture you to stop a behavior. Example, stop being difficult. That isn't actually what you are doing. Example, you are practicing radical honesty. Social projection. People often use themselves as a proxy, expecting your attitudes and behaviors to mirror their own. If they can't conceive of your non-theistic motive, they project a familiar, often negative one onto you. Misunderstanding of identity. Misunderstandings occur when others communicate a view of your identity or personality that is completely different from your own. Redundant moralizing. Critics preach to the choir of their own social norms, assuming you lack the very awareness or empathy that is actually driving your non-conformity. 3. The psychological toll. Isolation. Persistently feeling misunderstood leads to chronic isolation and stress, as the gap between your intent and the perception remains unbridged. I'll say that bit again. as the gap between your intent and their perception remains unbridged. Cognitive dissonance, external. You face social sanctions because you aren't following the good thing to do as defined by the group. Reconciliation. To survive this, you might adopt defense mechanisms like delegitimizing, discrediting the critic, or limiting impact, belittling the importance of their opinion, to maintain your internal peace. Now, I could keep going. Let's do this. So it says here, would you like to explore how to effectively communicate these non-theistic intentions to bridge the gap with those who preach to the choir? Now I'll stop there actually. The saying, there's sayings, hopefully we can all comprehend what a saying is, and preaching to the choir is a saying that, in my words now, off the top of my head, and off the top of my head is a saying, in my words now, preaching to the choir is telling someone something that they're already doing. So you can imagine a choir of people singing, and I think it's in the terms of, say, a choir singing the preached lessons and then the preacher preaching those lessons as though the choir doesn't know it, but they're literally singing it as a group. But that isn't the context it's used here, right? That's why it's a saying. And it hasn't harmed anyone. So to be against the grain, is it rebellion? Is it joyous rebellion? Or is it survival? Is it refusing to live this existence in a way that by proxy is, well, don't want to sound too negative, but some form of giving up, right? Like, is it safety and fear that make people give up their intuition, their internal compass? This is why today in this world we're having problems with understanding and picking apart what an inner monologue is, and people, I have an inner monologue, people, I don't have an inner monologue, and blah 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 blah, because people are now so sort of giving up that to, in order to achieve what we're told we should achieve, or, and it's not so much of what we should achieve, it seems to a lot of people the only way to survive. And then we get these questions like, oh, do you have an inner monologue? And then if someone says they do, and oh, well, I don't, so you must have a weird one, let's call it something. And then we can find all the people that have that, and then they are that. And then we can go, at least I don't have to think about that anymore. And yeah, like, it's a shitstorm, isn't it? And so what's happened to just, we need to train our mind like a muscle, slowly and gently, mindfulness, those classic things that train your mind to automatically know, oh, I can feel the chair on my backside, I can feel what my feet are touching, I can breathe the air and feel it in me. And if there are any smells or not, it's beside the point, right? I can hear what's going on. Um, as I speak, I can hear my actual voice in my actual ears. And I can also not say anything and imagine my voice saying things to me inside of my head. Now, is that hearing a voice? And is that the preaching to the choir kind of heavy, like sort of thing? Um, yeah, and so if you're wondering how this contextually could affect actual people, there's a few different ways in which it does. A heavy example is things such as excommunication. So when someone leaves a big group and or are exiled by a big group, then that sense of, where what I say, like to give up that for security or for survival, to give up that against the grain rebellion for a given amount of time or an unspecified amount of time, then have it sort of stripped from under you, and not just like disappeared, like you would consciously know that people in that group do not like you anymore, or they've turned their backs, they've betrayed you, and even worse, like some of those members will act out physically that kind of thing just to rub it in or to remind them or to get a sense of if you were to look up the term Nimrod, that sort of classifies that sort of action. And really, we're human beings, we're animals, right? If you decide that we're not animals, well, then how did we evolve? At what point did we stop becoming animals and start becoming another thing? And I mean, if you say, "Oh, we're human, not an animal," then that's a bird, not an animal, or that's a mammal, not an animal, and we are mammals, right? So yeah, it's quite easy to sort of fall to that conclusion jumping and then acting out on it against others because it doesn't fit your narrative. See, this is the difference between what is considered sort of, now I'm going to try and use my words carefully here, right? Because esoteric knowledge is quite dangerous to understand off the bat, because it will, in the self sense, it will have to be slowly understood in order to be able to make sense of it. There may be examples, say we use certain perfumes to attract certain lovers. Now that's sort of trickery. It's a victimless trickery up until there becomes some sort of revelation that the reward is unwanted now, because it's been revealed that it was veiled in trickery. Now if the reward was still wanted, so be it. If it's not wanted, well then you move on. See, that's sort of down here, whereas a little bit sort of more philosophical is to consider that we are an individual and everything that we can possibly conceive is a creation of the individual themselves. Now that is going to be hard to swallow, isn't it? And if we sort of spend a lot of time ridiculing that notion, well, then that's going to be hard to swallow. And a lot of people aren't willing to do that. They'll turn away, and instead of simply letting it be, we get this Nimrod effect again where I can't have that in the world. You know? So is it a sort of cloning? Yeah, obviously, that's going to take a bit to digest for a lot of people, I'd imagine so. But I'm posting it on here because I give you the dignity and the respect to be able to handle this information responsibly. It's coming straight off my mind after that original reading, as you could tell, the transition, hopefully. And I think I'll leave it at that.